want to begin the sermon today by going to the book of Thessalonians. Let's go to 1 Thessalonians. And by the way, welcome to our guests that are here today. Glad to have you. But 1 Thessalonians, where I'd like to start. And we'll go to chapter 5. And we'll start in verse 1. It says, "But concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you," Paul says. "For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night." So it's going to come, verse 3 says, "For when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape." So a woman with child knows that she has a child to bear, but she doesn't know the exact time that she's going to go into labor and give birth. And God said it'll be the same thing here when it comes to the time of the end. As far as the world is concerned, it will catch them unexpectedly. They're not going to be prepared for it. And he says sudden destruction, and we see thief in the night. As in the days of Noah, we see a likened to that as well. And look, until the ark was shut and the rain started, people didn't buy it. They didn't believe it. Only 8 people were on the ark, but it caught them by surprise unexpectedly. Look at Luke. We'll come back here, but Luke 21, verses 34 and 35 really fit well there. Notice what this gospel account says here in Luke 21, verses 34 and 35. "But take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and the cares of this life, that day come upon you unexpectedly." We've got lots of warnings in the scripture that, pay attention at the time of the end. Don't be caught asleep. Don't let this catch you unexpectedly. God says, I've given you a lot of information in the prophecies of the Bible, and I've given you things to look for. And when you begin to see these things happen, know the end is near. It's like when the trees begin to bud in the spring, look, spring's here, summer's coming, the season's changing. He said the signs will be there. And they certainly are there when you look at the world around us. Just recently, this week or in the recent couple weeks, Kellogg's came out with a new cereal, and it's their gay pride cereal. So they've mixed a bunch of the different kind of cereals together and put it in a purple box and advertise it, and they're trying to sell it to kids. And so what are we pushing on the kids? What kind of thinking is that we're pushing on the youth in our country and around the world? I mean, they sell cereal all over the world. But it just shows you how far Satan has gone and how far our society has gone into the cesspool, right? We know when we get to that point where the world is totally corrupt, and it's violent. The world is violent in so many places. Even our own cities are violent. I lived in Baltimore. Just look at some of our big cities. Go Google it and check it out and see how many people die through gunfire in those cities in a year. It's amazing how many people are affected by violence in this country and around the world. And, we have whole cities in America and certainly all over the world where you couldn't find 10 righteous, just like in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah. We're there, and God doesn't allow that to continue for long. So the signs are here. We're beginning to see big things happen. We know we're over $30 trillion in debt, our nation. There's a reckoning coming for that. You can't continue to print money without consequence. And big things are happening in Europe. We need to pay attention to those things, and we'll certainly cover those in sermons and sermonettes and other things as we, move forward. But, the world won't see it coming. It's going to come upon them unexpectedly. Verse 35 here in Luke 21, "For it will come as a snare on all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth." And if you have been a trapper, you know what a snare is, right? You set it up. The animal doesn't know it's there. It's unexpected. He walks right into the snare, and now he's caught. And that's what will happen here at the time of the end. Go back to 1 Thessalonians 5. 1 Thessalonians 5. Continue here. Verse 4. It says, "But you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. So those of us that are called, that God's opened our minds to understand the truth that we find in the pages of the Bible, should not be caught basically unprepared. We shouldn't be caught sleeping, it says. We're in the light, we're not in the darkness. In other words, we're not spiritually blinded. We're not in darkness, we're not in ignorance. We know better. And God will hold us accountable. To whom much is given, much is required. And when you know about something and you don't heed it and you don't do anything, God says, well, you knew better. I'm going to hold you accountable. These other people are ignorant. They're in darkness. They're spiritually blind. There's a veil over their eyes. It's not over your eyes, and you're not in the darkness, so this shouldn't take you by surprise. Verse 5, you are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. It appears to me that many people in the churches or organizations are asleep. People are asleep everywhere. And God said, don't fall asleep. Don't get lackadaisical, right? Don't just coast. Don't let this kind of urgency get away from you. Realize it's imminent. It's here. We're on the home stretch. And don't be caught asleep. Verse 7, for those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk are drunk at night. That's a good time for sleeping, and it's usually when people get drunk. They drink too much. And we just saw in Luke 21:34, don't let carousing and drunkenness and the cares of this life consume so much of your energy and time that you're not praying, you're not studying, you're not close to God, and you get caught unaware. You're asleep. God said, don't let that happen. Verse 8, but let us who are of the day be sober. We need to pay attention, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and as a helmet, the hope of salvation. God says, look, these things are necessary. You've got to have hope. You've got to have faith. You've got to have love. These are really important if you have to survive difficult things at the time of the end. And in the context, we want to talk more about faith today. We've been talking a fair amount about faith in the last year. And at camp, we're going to be talking about love. Our camp theme is John 13:35. By this shall all know that you're my disciples, if you have love one for another. 10 messages in those Christian living classes will all be tailored toward that topic. And they'll all be different angles of how we show love for one another and for the brethren and our neighbors. But we'll talk a lot about love. Love is one of the three things mentioned there in verse 8. Hope is the other, and faith is the third one. When you look at 1 Corinthians 13:13, let's go over there for a minute. 1 Corinthians 13:13. Most of you are familiar with chapter 13. It talks about charity in the King James, or love here in the New King James, and the importance of love, and that love is the most important of the three things mentioned. But verse 13 says, and now abide faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. And it shouldn't surprise us that the greatest of the three is love, because God literally is love. 1 John 4:8 says God is love. And the person who doesn't love doesn't know God. So love is important, but it says, wait, faith and hope and love, these three abide. They're all important. Faith is critical at the time of the end. Of course, love is. And we live at a time when you look at the description of the Bible where love has gone out the window. People are proud, they're boastful, they're selfish. That's part of the world that we live in. And God said it will be that way at the time of the end. And love would be kind of a rare commodity. And faith too. Will I even find faith, right? When I return, God says. It's important. These sermons that we give on faith, we don't give them just to be repetitive. We understand how important it is. We understand how close we are to the end and how necessary it is. And when things get harder, which they will, and we read the prophecies in the Bible, if you don't trust God and you don't have God on your side and you're not close to him, you will not survive spiritually the things that are coming. We've always been given warnings. God has always done that for his people. When catastrophes coming, his people have been warned. I think of Mr. Armstrong in the last years of his life constantly talked about the two trees, the give way, the get way, these two different contrasting ways of life. And he'd go back to the Garden of Eden and talk about the two trees. It was the message we needed. If we had been paying attention as a church of 155,000 people by at least 1988, that was the number, we'd still be here. But where did all these people go, right? They weren't listening. They may have heard it, but it went out the other ear. They weren't paying attention. I look at where we came from, living. Mr. Meredith talked about faith. That was a big topic for him in the last years of his life. It was important. Need a little faith? Where's the faith? It's gone. We better have faith. The people that are here, the people that are still in the church of God, the people that have God's Spirit, better have faith. God will be looking for it, and he can't please him without it, he says. Let's go to the 20th chapter of John, and I want to spend a little time here in John 20. John chapter 20. And the title of the sermon comes here from John chapter 20. The title is, Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Here we have the story of Thomas. We regularly refer to this short section as the section regarding doubting Thomas. In John 20, in verse 24, it says, But Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. In the days of Christ, it was common for the Jews to have two names, a Jewish one and a Gentile one. And the name Thomas in the Hebrew was the name that Thomas went by, and Didymus in the Greek was the name that he went by. Both those words signify twin. So it's likely that he was one, that he was a twin. We don't know that for sure, but that's what the word means. And for whatever reason, Thomas was not with the rest of the disciples when they were assembled together when Jesus appeared among them before this incident. We don't know why he wasn't there. We can speculate, but that's all it would be, a speculation. The fact is he just wasn't there. Verse 25, the other disciples therefore said to him, We have seen the Lord. But he said to them, Unless I see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. So the gaping hole in his side was big enough to put a hand into, and it was that thrust of that spear that took Christ's life. You don't get that if you just look at John's account, but when you put the gospel accounts together and the missing part of a verse in Matthew, you see that it was the blood and water that came out, and Christ's blood needed to be shed, just like the lamb's blood, and he died from that final thrust of the spear. And it was big enough that you could literally put your hand into it. And Thomas, or Didymus, says, I'm not going to buy this until I see it, feel it. I can't just see it, I'm going to touch it. So he demands that, he have evidence in both of those senses. Seeing was not enough. And if he could see and touch, then he would believe. But otherwise, it says at the end of that verse, I will not believe. And that phrase is expressed really in the strongest form. It's a double Greek negative, and it really, if in English, could read, if I shall see, I will believe, is not what it really says. It really should be, unless I see, I will not believe. It's a double negative. Unless I see, I will not believe is really a better translation of that. It says, after 8 days, his disciples, verse 26, were again inside, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst and said, Peace to you. As a spirit being, Christ didn't need to open the doors. He could go through the door. He could pass right through it. He could come through the wall. Spirit beings are different than us. They're composed of spirit. And it's interesting that we have that detail in John's account Why were the doors shut? Well, probably for the same reasons we see in other verses, for fear of the Jews and for privacy. They were in their meeting and they wanted the door shut and keep it quiet, keep it private. Doors don't matter. You can't keep Christ out of a door with a door or a lock or a wall or anything else. He passed through the doors. Verse 27, he said to Thomas, reach your finger here and look at my hands, and reach your hand here and put it into my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing. He said to Thomas, he gave him a little gentle correction, but did it in a nice way. He said, look, if that's what it takes basically for you to get it, do it. Come over here, touch me, feel this. And Thomas answered and said to him, my Lord and my God. At this point, Thomas no longer doubted, he believed. And he yielded himself as a servant to be guided by Jesus Christ, who was his Lord and his God, he said. There's no more doubt in my mind at this point. Verse 29, Jesus said to him, Thomas, because you've seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. And that's what I want to focus on here today. None of us in this room, you can tell me different if you want, but have seen Christ. And if you tell me different, we'll counsel with you. But none of us have seen Christ. None of us have touched him. We haven't talked to him. Like our five senses, in that sense, we haven't felt him, touched him, right, heard him, any of those things. And yet we believe that God exists. We believe that there's a Father, that he has a Son, that his Son, Jesus Christ, died for our sins. We buy that. We believe that, and we have not seen, and God says, blessed. And most people in human history fall into the category we do. They haven't seen or felt or heard him speak in person. That's coming, and we look forward to that in the millennium. But yet we believe. We're walking by faith, right? Not by sight, as it says in 2 Corinthians 5:7. We walk by faith, not by sight. And really, when it comes to faith, all faith, is of things not seen. God blesses, he says, those most who have faith, who implicitly rely on his word. And we all know Hebrews 11:1 is the very definition of faith. We nickname Hebrews 11 the faith chapter. And it says there in verse 1, faith is the substance or the realization of things hoped for, the evidence or confidence would be another translation of things not seen. And for Thomas and for us, the message is clear: stop doubting and believe. What will it take for you and I to put the doubt aside and trust God and believe that what he says he will do? And that means when it comes to healing, that means and we've had some really amazing healings, and I'm sure we'll have more. God will bless that faith. And regularly throughout the scriptures, we see, especially in the gospel accounts, Christ said, according to your faith be it unto you. When he do you believe? Sometimes the man says, yeah, I believe, help my unbelief, but I believe. And Christ then healed that person. And regularly when I'm praying for people, God bless them according to their faith. I don't expect you to heal them if they don't trust you. If they don't have faith, this falls on the individual asking for the healing. Now, I have to give an effectual, fervent prayer. That's my part of it, right? I'm the 9/16 wrench that hopefully God can use as a tool in his hands to do what he asked me to do. But at the end of the day, what did Christ himself say? Do you have faith? According to your faith, be it unto you. How come Christ could not do many mighty works or miracles in his own country? That's just the carpenter's son. I know his brothers and his sisters and Mary, the mother. I mean, that guy, nothing good comes from Nazareth. And not many mighty works were done there. And that was Christ himself. Why? Not because he lacked faith. He had faith to move mountains, walk on the water, raise the dead to life. And so remember this. It's so important for you and I to have faith. And that even is a gift of God. He gives it to us. You have a role to play. I have a role to play. If David didn't get the smooth stones and the sling and charge into battle, we wouldn't read the story, right? He had a role to play in David and Goliath, the story in the Bible. My dad used to always say, pray to God, but continue to row to shore. Like, you have to do your part. I have to do my part. Move on to verse 29. We're adding to the sermon here today. It's awesome. Verse 29, and truly Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. Not only the proofs of the resurrection, but the signs he performed throughout his lifetime. And John's narrative is kind of drawing to a close here at the end of this gospel account. And he explains the fact that he's only recorded a little of a life that contains so much with Jesus Christ. Verse 30, but he says this, but these things are written, why? That you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. The words are here as evidence, as proof that these things happened. And John says, I don't want you to doubt it for a second. These words are written so that those who read this account can be convinced of two things. Number one, Jesus is the Christ. And number two, he's the Son of God. And as a result, those who look at these proofs might really be convinced of both, and in the end, choose life. Not saved yet. What does Matthew 24, verse 13 say, or 14? I think it's 13. He who endures to the end, the same shall be saved. You're not saved yet. We have to put all the scriptures together. When you read some of these verses in the gospel accounts, you take one verse out of context and you make it say something that's not in the Bible. Shame on the person that does that. We got to let the Bible interpret itself. But it is a path to life, right? We are begotten. We're not yet born into God's family. We'll be born again someday in the future as spirit beings and members of the very family of God. That's an amazing truth that the religions of the world have never known or teach. They don't know about it. They would consider what we teach blasphemy, but it is at the heart and core of what we're all about. God is developing a family that will someday rule with him. And we can be a part of that. It's a tremendous opportunity. We have to choose life. We have to do our part. God's not going to force eternal life on anyone. And so he's made us human beings, and the character development has to occur over a lifetime. Some people a shorter amount of time, and others a longer amount of time, but God decides how much time and how to develop that character. And therefore, we will have tests. We will have trials. We will have sickness from time to time. And God goes, that's a test. I'll heal you. You'll be okay. But I've got to test you a little bit. I've got to see if we can strengthen your faith. He will put you in situations where you have to be brave. You have to be courageous. For little kids, it might be standing up for what they believe at school. Like, no, I'm not going to do Christmas art. Or I'm not going to be in the Halloween parade this next, when end of October comes. It might be standing up in a college class and disagreeing with the professor or what is going on in the class because they solicit the input. Okay, I'll give you my input. You asked. It might be on the job, right? That happens. I know Casey's been challenged with that recently with his new job on a number of occasions. So he's at home getting all his ammunition in order and back to work and laying it on the table. This is what I believe, and here's why. It comes different ways. Your faith, your courage, whether or not you're brave, whether or not you will deny Christ or you stand up for what's right and do the right thing, that's part of what we'll all experience. Nobody gets to hide from that. And you can't get in the kingdom on the coattails of anybody else. You have to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. That's your job. And God's there to help you. He will give you, his spirit after you repent and you're baptized, have a laying on of hands. You have my spirit. I'm here for you. I'm the author and the finisher of your faith, but you have to do your part. That's why I made you human. We could have shortcut this and went right to spirit beings like the angels, but that's not what he did. He decided this is how we'd do it. Hebrews 11, verse 6. We just dropped down a few verses. Most of you know this verse by heart. It says, without faith, it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. No one can please God unless he grasps both of these truths. Number one, that he is, that God exists. Again, we haven't seen him. All we have is this, the Word of God, and we believe it. We have the faith that he does exist, and that his Father sits on a throne, and that Christ is at his right hand right now. We believe it because the Bible says it. We believe this to be the inspired Word of God, and we really stake our lives on it. And our lives are greatly affected by this Bible. When I was 7, we came into church. I'm 58, so I've been in the church a long time. But I do remember a few Christmases and Halloween, outings before we were called. My mom and dad were Lutheran, both of them, and it was a big change to come into the church. Some of you I know are Lutheran or were Lutheran. Hopefully you're not anymore, right? I called you into the truth, opened your mind. You're here on Saturday, not on Sunday, because that's what he commands. That's what the Bible says. He's trying to do what God asks you to do, and that's what we should do. But the contrast is dark, light, right? Night and day. I can't imagine life anymore without the Feast of Tabernacles and the Sabbath and the holy days. It wouldn't be the same. A lot of our opportunities to travel and see the world have been because we save our tithe and we go to the feast. Tremendous opportunities that many people in the world don't have or experience. It's amazing. God says, keep your second tithe, right, for yourself and your family so you can enjoy the feast and the holy days. And people who don't faithfully tithe rob their wife and kids and family of the joy they should have if they don't do what God says. But if you faithfully keep 10%, a tithe, that's what it means, you can enjoy the holy days and the wonderful blessing of the Feast of Tabernacles and afford it and not, get your credit card out and put more on that. It's a great plan. But if you don't believe God exists, you won't go through the process of doing any of this. Why? Just do whatever you want, right? If I don't believe God exists, why do I try to do anything the Bible says? Because I don't believe in it. So we believe he exists. We can't doubt his existence. Number two, that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. And that's equally necessary. If we do not believe that God will hear and answer our prayers, then there's no reason to call upon him. Don't waste your time praying if you don't believe. If you doubt, because you are wasting your time. Our thinking has to change, all of us, and it should change right now. You trust God, you believe God, you believe in his promises, you claim those promises. I was corrected or blasted pretty hard in a sermon from a man a while back who said that what we're saying in Church of God Assembly is basically we were demanding what God does. Like we tell him what to do and he does it. That's preposterous. But it's not preposterous. Is go to Malachi chapter 3, 8, 9, and 10. And this is one example. This has to do with tithing. It says, will a man, Malachi 3, 8, 9, and 10, will a man rob God, yet you have robbed me? Now again, if you don't tithe a tenth to God, it's his money. By the way, when we look at camp, these are his kids. If we're a camp director or assistant director or a member of the staff, some of them are our own children, some are other people's children, but they're God's kids. And this is his church. This isn't our church. This isn't our youth program. It's his. We're just simply servants. We put things in place so that it can happen. We spend money, and I spent a lot. So, I think it's worth every cent. We don't want to lose the kids that are already here. So let's make it happen. Let's have a family weekend every year. Let's have camp. We'll have the feast. We'll space those things out so people can get together and meet other friends in the church and eventually, hopefully, even date and marry somebody that they meet that is a believer that's on the same page. But he says, don't rob me. You can't rob God if the tithe isn't his. He goes, that's my tithe. These are my offerings, and I give you it all, and then I ask you to give me a tithe back. And then I give that tithe away to do the work and pay the ministry and fund camp and all the other projects. And camp, some people underestimate the value of a youth program or camp. Mr. Armstrong did not. Worked in the early 80s, and I remember him coming to War and speaking about how important the youth program is. He knew how valuable it was. He put a lot of effort and time into working with the youth. We had 2 Imperial schools, and I worked at the one in Pasadena for more than 12 years. 2, one in Big Sandy, one in Imperial. We had 3 Ambassador College campuses at one time: Brickett Wood, Big Sandy, Pasadena. We had a youth program, YOU. We had a summer educational program, SEP. We had a youth magazine for a number of years. Did he put any money and effort into the youth? Absolutely. Substantial effort. And even in his old age, would jump on the G3, fly up to Ora, Minnesota, come to camp and talk to those kids every summer. Right up till maybe the last year where he couldn't. His health wasn't good enough. Because he knew it was important. This is the future. These are the kids that are going to grow up and have more kids and help the church grow. And we value it. But, if we don't really believe this, well, a man robbed God, yet you've robbed me. But you say, in what way we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. You are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even the whole nation. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. And he says, prove me now in this. Prove me, test me, God says, if I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you such a blessing that there will not be room enough to receive it. That's what God wants you to do. Trust me, prove me. Take me to task on it, God said. Watch what happens. Watch the miracles occur. But you can't doubt. You can't let that creep in. Doubt is a faith killer. Get rid of that. I've mentioned this before. I had stage 4 cancer, 6 years ago now. Every now and then I get a pain here, I got an ache there, a little doubt creeps in, is cancer coming back? And then I put that thought right back out. Where's your faith? Put it out. Do your part. God's got it. If he wants you alive, you be alive. If he doesn't, well, time to go to sleep. But don't doubt. Move forward. God can't be pleased with a person who has no faith, and he says, prove me. This is one example on tithing. There's many other promises in the Bible. Healing's another excellent example where God says, test me on this, prove me on this, see what I'll do. I'm God. How real is God to you? How real is God to me? We have to ask those questions. When the going gets tough, right, and it doesn't look good, do you still have confidence, faith that God will deliver you, that he is there, and that he cares about you, and that you're one of his special people that he's called now? Look at Psalm 23. This is a psalm in our hymnal. Beautiful psalm. Most of us know Psalm 23, at least most of it by heart, just because we sing that song. Psalm 23. This is a psalm of David. And I want to go through the first 4 verses. These verses, by the way, portray God as a good shepherd and us as the sheep in the pasture. And my shepherd here is a metaphor. And we find that metaphor frequently throughout the scriptures. And David here, after surviving many difficult years of warfare and rebellion and crime and sorrow, and a lot of things David went through as you read in the pages of the Bible. We find David now as a king, and he's looking back when he when he writes a psalm, and he's looking back with vivid and loving remembrance to his childhood when he was a shepherd out tending the sheep, and he kind of brings these thoughts back into memory of the time he spent in the green valleys, besides the gentle streams, the dark glens, the valleys, and where he had led his flock when he was young. And David knew by experience, because David was a shepherd, he knew by experience that a good shepherd is skillful and faithful and mindful of the sheep. The good shepherd really cares about those sheep. And David obviously cared about the sheep when he was willing to take on a bear, and he was willing to take on a lion that come to, get the sheep. And God is the best shepherd ever, right? He is the good shepherd. And he cares for us, and he protects us, and he looks after us. And sometimes we forget that if we have a sickness, or we forget that if we're going through a difficult trial. He's the good shepherd. You're one of the sheep. We know God, and he knows us by name. That's nice. Cool water. So in verse 1, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. This is really the main idea of the psalm, I shall not want. God always is concerned about our welfare, and he knows that we have certain provisions that we have to have. We're human. We have to have water, we have to have food, we have to have shelter. He knows that. And the good shepherd knows what the sheep need. They've got to have food, right? They also have to have water. They sometimes need to go into shelter in bad weather. And a good shepherd makes those provisions and looks after those sheep and won't let anything, harm them. Verse 2, he makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. So you think of this good tender green grass, and great place for the flock to graze. Really, this is a description of a flock that's in the midst of abundance. They've got everything they need. They're content. They're happy. They're safe. And he talks about the still waters where they can find rest and refreshment, these cool, still waters. It's really a picture of complete happiness here. Verse 3, he says, he restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. So God, as the good shepherd, David says, restores my soul. And the word really in the original means refreshes. He causes life to return is another way to say it. He quickens me or causes me to live is another translation. So it's referring to somebody who is exhausted, somebody who's wearied, somebody who is troubled and worn down, in mind and in heart and physically just spent. And what does God do? He brings back the vigor. He brings back the life. He fills the individual with renewed energy and joy. And that's what God does for us. And David got that. He wrote about it. And he says he leads me in the paths of righteousness, in the right ways, in the right paths, those that are safe. And God directs and guides the sheep. And that's what a shepherd does. He doesn't let them get too close to the cliff and fall off. He doesn't lead them, into a lion's den. He doesn't allow the sheep to wander in ways that lead to their destruction or their ruin. And God does that for us. He guides us in the way that leads to life, and he does it for his name's sake, so his name may be honored. He is the good shepherd. He is the protector. We read about David, and we have respect for a man who put it on the line to watch a sheep and kill a bear and a lion. And God is thousands of times better of a shepherd than David ever was. But we can look at that physical example of a good shepherd and we go, Christ, God the Father, these two powerful spirit beings care about us. The Father handpicked us, drew us to Christ. We've been given a tremendous opportunity to know the truth now. And we should never take that for granted, our calling. And God chooses the weak and the base. He chooses the simple people. Our ministers, we have 9 ministers right now that are with us, and they're all simple guys, right? They're farmers, they're construction workers, they're simple people. I was a teacher for years, not some highfalutin job. I'm just basic teacher and worked with kids and youth programs and find myself now just working with older kids, right? You guys. It's just a little different. but kind of the same. Verse 4, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. David never let his fears get in the way, right? He confidently relied on God. We have to learn to think more that way, confidently rely on God. David says, you're with me, and we have to think that way. God, you're with me. This is difficult, what I'm dealing with, or this is a hard thing I'm going through, or this is, whether it's family or work or whatever, church-related. A true believer, though, has nothing to fear. Even in the valley of the shadow of death, he said, God's with me, I'm not afraid here. Your rod and staff, those are the things a shepherd uses, right, to rescue, to protect, to guide the sheep. They're symbols of the good shepherd's care over a flock. Do we believe this? It's a psalm, but that psalm is written for us to read and to, frankly, be refreshed by reading and encouraged by reading and really understanding what it's all about and how much care God has for us. God also sets his angels about us. That's something else we sometimes forget. We get in a tough spot. We're not thinking about all the angels that are right there. You can't see them. They're invisible unless they choose to manifest themselves. And they can manifest themselves as men. That's happened many times in the pages of the Bible. And God says that it's possible to entertain an angel unaware. You thought it was another human being, but it was an angel. And in the future, we might be shocked to realize that we did, in fact, entertain an angel and didn't know it. And then we'll see that angel and say, oh, I remember you. And yeah, I was an angel. I was there. You just didn't know it. Psalm 34:7. Psalm 34:7, just a few pages over. The Psalms, there's a lot of Psalms here. This is a big book. Psalms are important. Singing's important, right? We'll always sing. Even if we're in prison, we'll sing. That ain't ever going to stop. Psalm 34, verse 7. The angel of the Lord encamps all around those who fear him and delivers them. Once again, do we believe that? It's there. It's true. They're ministering spirits. You know, how many angels are there? There's quite a few. In the case of Daniel, in Daniel 6, I'll just read 2 verses, but notice here, Daniel 6 is another, that whole story of Daniel in the den of lions is a very encouraging story. And these are the stories we should share with our kids. Make sure they know these stories as they grow up. They're interesting. They're something that'll grab their attention. Daniel 6:22, it says, my God, Daniel says, sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. Verse 23, and the king was exceedingly glad for him and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him. Why? Because he believed in his God. That's an important part of the verse, because he believed in his God. He knew that God had it. And he didn't go up there and pray silently. He opened the windows like he always opened them, even after the writing was signed, and he knew about it. He said, they're not going to bully me, and I'm going to do what I always did, and I don't care what the consequences are, because God will take care of this. And he did. But that was faith, that was trust, that was confidence in God's abilities to really put your life on the line. You know, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego put their lives on the line. And they did it because they believed. They had confidence that God would deal with this in the right way and that they'd be all right, that they'd get through it. Look at 2 Kings 6. 2 Kings chapter 6. We'll start in verse 8. I'm going to spend a little time here too. These stories are encouraging. These stories lift us up. They build and strengthen our faith. Because the same God that did all these things we read about in pages of the Bible is alive and well, and he can do them again. And he can do different ones that more interesting stories that we'll, read about, hear about in the future. God looks for those opportunities, the Bible says, to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him, he says. 2 Kings 6, verse 8. Now the king of Syria was making war against Israel, and he took counsel with his servants, saying, my camp will be in such and such a place. So the narrative here takes us into the tent of this king Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram, and it takes us right into the meetings that he had with his general staff. And when it uses the phrase such and such a place, the expression is Hebrew, and it means in a certain one, I'll not mention which, in such and such. In a certain place, I'm not going to mention which. And the man of God, which was Elisha in the story, sent to the king of Israel, which was Jehoram, saying, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are coming down there. Then the king of Israel sent someone to the place of which the man of God had told him. So the king wanted to verify. Elisha said, don't go there. They're setting a trap. They're going to ambush you. But the king, Jehoram, wanted to verify it, so he sent spies down there. And sure enough, every time Elisha said they were laying in wait, they were. And thus he warned him, and he was watchful there not just once or twice, but several times. This didn't just happen one or two times. The scripture says it happened several times, and every time Elisha was right. And repeatedly, he informed the king, Jehoram, of the place where the Syrians had determined to ambush the Israelites. Verse 11, therefore the heart of the king of Assyria was greatly troubled by this thing, and he called his servants and said to them, will you not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? It says greatly troubled. His heart is greatly troubled. It literally means a storm tossed. In other words, the king is very uneasy in his mind and in his heart. And to his consternation, his plans were known to the king of Israel every time. And Ben-Hadad suspected treachery. There's got to be a traitor here among his subjects, is what he thinks, logically. And so he asked the question, who's the traitor? He demanded to know, who is it? There's no way they can know all this every time unless there's a traitor here, somebody that's telling them. Verse 12, and one of his servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elisha the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. There's no traitor in your camp or in your court. We're all true men. It's not us. It's Elisha. And the very words that you speak in your bedroom or your bedchamber, in the most private place, in the most secret manner, he knows about it. Elisha had the thoughts and the plans of the enemy revealed to him by God. God can do amazing things. And so, verse 13, so he said, go and see where he is, that I may send and get him. And it was told him, saying, surely he is in Dothan. He sends men, go find out where he's at, and we're going to go get him, and bring him dead or alive. Dothan is in the central highlands of Israel. And notice verse 14, he sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. He didn't send a few men, he sent a number, a host. In fact, enough to surround the city. That's a lot of troops. You think about it. Even a small city, that takes a lot of people to surround it where no one can escape. If he's in the city, there's no way he's fleeing the city. We'll catch him when he tries. And they have horses, they have chariots, and they're going to take him by surprise. That's why they came at night. Verse 15, and when the servant of the man of God rose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? Is there any way we can escape? We're trapped. What are we going to do? Is what the servant of Elisha says to Elisha. Elisha's response is awesome. Look what he says. So he answered, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Now, humanly speaking, if you didn't know there were angels, you go, this guy has lost it. Like I'm looking, I don't see, it's you and I, buddy. There's nobody else. But Elisha didn't think that way. And obviously this servant was someone who had to learn a lesson. Elisha knew that God's unseen army was far more powerful than any human visible army. And Elisha, verse 17, Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. It's interesting that Elisha didn't ask to see himself. He already knew it. He couldn't see it, but he knew it. He believed it. But my servant needs to see it. If he sees it, he'll believe. Let him see this. And God honored his request. Psalm 3:6. Keep your spot here, but Psalm 3:6. Another good psalm, a couple here, Psalm 27, just two of them. Psalm 3, verse 6 says, I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me all around. The psalmist once again says, I don't care how many they are. 10,000s with an S of people. They can set themselves against me. They can encircle me. I'm not afraid of that. Well, why? Because once again, he realized God was far more powerful. That he had angel armies that he could command at a moment's notice. A couple pages further, Psalm 27. These verses ought to encourage us. And these are things we have to tell our children. Look, there's angels. God said angels about you. Psalm 27, the first 4 verses. It says, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Get rid of the fear, the cowardice. Think differently. Be brave. Be courageous. Be confident. Not in your own strength or might, but in God's. When the wicked came against me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though an army should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this I will be confident. One thing I have desired of the Lord, that I will seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. David got it. He was not a fearful man. And everything you read about him and his mighty men and people that surrounded him, these were courageous, confident people that trusted God and performed mighty feats because God was with them. They weren't afraid. Even in time of war, when they're outnumbered, and sometimes as one man or two of them in a field, they fought to the last man, and they were victorious time and time again. So God opened the eyes of the young man. He saw what lay beyond normal human sight. He was able to see, and that changed everything as far as the young man's thinking went. So when the Syrians, verse 18, came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, strike this people, I pray, with blindness. And he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. And now Elisha said to them, this is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me, and I'll bring you to the man whom you seek. And he led them to Samaria. So Elisha took these troops that sought to wipe the Israelites out. Once God struck them blind, he led them into the heart of Samaria, into the Israelite heartland. And basically, you see what happened next, verse 20. So it was when they came to Samaria that Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. And the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw, and there they were inside Samaria with an exclamation point. They were right in the heart of a place they could easily have been slaughtered. And notice what the king of Israel says. And now when the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, my father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them? He repeats it. Shall I kill them? Shall I kill them? And it marks extreme eagerness here to smite these guys. Let me take them out. Let me kill them. Elisha didn't allow that to happen. And it's interesting here that he called Elisha my father. It was a term of deference here. It was earlier used by Elisha to Elijah. We see that in 2 Kings 2:12. And it was also used by Naaman and his servants. So we see that in 2 Kings 5:13. So basically the king, Jehoram, is deferring to Elisha because, after all, God had delivered Elisha, and Elisha was the one that led him into this trap in Samaria. and he's deferring to him. And he asks him, shall I kill him? Shall I kill him? Verse 22, and he answered, you shall not kill them. Will you kill those whom you have taken captive with your sword and your bow? Set food and water before them that they may eat and drink and go to their master. Elisha's following a principle we find in the New Testament today in Romans 12, 20 and 21. Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. It says if your enemy hungers there in Romans 12:20, feed him. If he thirsts, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. It's hard for these men, once they have been treated well, they're seeking to destroy the Israelites. They're setting traps to ambush and wipe them out, and now they find themselves flip-flopped, right? They're in a spot where they can be slaughtered, and instead of them being put to death, they're given a banquet and sent back to the king. It's hard for those people to come back and kill those people later on, right? And so it worked. Notice what it says here. Verse 23, he prepared a great feast for them, and after they ate and drank, he sent them away, and they went to their master. So the bands of Syrian raiders came no more into the land of Israel. It's an amazing story. The blind soldiers taken to the capital city of Israel, and instead here of being killed, they're given a banquet. They're sent back to Ben-Hadad unharmed. And as a result, the bands of raiders came no more into the land of Israel, at least for a period of time. We see it wasn't long, but a period of time. And their hearts went back to, we got a war, we got to fight these guys. And war ended up coming back, but it at least brought a temporary peace because of the way it was handled. I mentioned how many angels are there. Well, let's look at a couple verses in the Bible. Revelation 5:11. There are many. I'll just pick a couple. Revelation 5, verse 11. It says, then I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, the living creatures and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. That's 100 million and thousands of thousands. So it doesn't give us the number, but that's a lot. That's a lot of angels, and God has work for the angels to do, and part of what they do is they're ministering spirits, and they attend to his people. Look at Hebrews 12:22. Hebrews 12:22. It says, but you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels. It's just a lot. I'm sure God has names for them, and just like he does the stars and everything else, but as far as we're concerned as human beings, all we need to know is there's a whole bunch, more than you can imagine. And there are many other scriptures in the Bible that indicate that. And Psalm 91 is one of the places that we have turned to recently. I'll just a couple verses here, just by way of review, talking about the protection we are granted by God through the use of angels. He says in verse 9, Psalm 91, because you have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, your habitation, no evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling. There are people who say, that's Old Testament. That doesn't count right now. I'm sorry, it does count. All these verses do count. This does mean what it says. It also, in verse 6, says, nor the pestilence that walks in the darkness. That's not going to come upon you. God meant it. He said it. Claim the promise. And then he also says, even if you get sick, even if you do get something, I'm the God who heals you. So either way, good. Maybe I need to strengthen your character, exercise your faith, let you go through this to strengthen you, strengthen others. I'll allow it. But in the end, I know what I'm doing. I'm God. And it's got a purpose, what I'm doing here. Verse 10. Verse 11, for he shall give his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways. God says, take care of this. That's your job, angels. Go. He gives his angels charge over us to keep us, to protect us, to guide us, to help us in ways. They're there. We have to ask ourselves, do we believe it? Do we live our lives like we believe it? God said it. God meant it. Elisha did not need to see to believe, and we shouldn't either. The servant did. He needed to see. Faith and hope are things that go hand in hand. Faith and hope. Go to Romans 8, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on hope. That's a whole other topic, but can hardly talk about faith without hope, or at least mentioning it. In Romans 8, let's start in verse 24. It says, for we were saved in this hope. It says, but hope that is seen is not hope. For why does one still hope for what he sees? What the author is saying, what Paul is saying is you don't need hope if you already have it. You hope for things you don't have yet. So if you already see it, if it's already there, you don't need to hope for it anymore. You've got it. Your request has been granted. Verse 25, but if we hope, it says, but if we hope for what we do not see, then we eagerly wait for it with perseverance. So you don't see it, you're hoping for it, and you eagerly wait, and then you persevere. You don't quit. You don't give up hope. You press forward. Have hope. Trust God. Move forward. And just keep on keeping on. Persevere until God grants the request, until God intervenes. And once he gives it to you and answers your prayer, you don't need to hope for it anymore. You got it. Move on to the next challenge, the next test. And life is a series of challenges. And we can take life one of two ways. Positive, keep your head up, say positive, and look at life as challenging. Or you can be negative and depressed and woe is me and down in the dumps. And nobody will really want to be around you. You're not going to be able to help anybody, even if you're going through a hard time. Sometimes I've found in my life, the harder thing I go through, the easier it is for me to help somebody else. When I had cancer, everybody's tuning into the Friday night Bible study. They call them the cancer Bible studies. Oh, the views went way up super high. They're like, this guy's going to die. We got to see the last few Bible studies before it happens. Right? They're all tuned in. Let's check this out. And there was just one thing after another. We had, I went one night right before Bible study, about maybe 45 minutes. I'm going to print my notes, and we're out of toner. And there's a staple, so we jumped in the van, the church van, and I just went alone. I was in a hurry, zipped over there. Joette wasn't home yet. Grabbed the toner, zipping back home. I stop at a light. There's a car ahead of me, a Lexus. I remember a black Lexus. It parked in front of me. I parked behind it. And there were about 5 cars that I passed in a line at the double lane, and they were parked at a red light. And I was in a hurry, and I hit the brake, and the phone fell on the ground, so I unbuckled. I was reaching down to get my phone. I sat up, and a bomb went off. At least that's what I thought it was. It was somebody rear-ending me at about 45 miles an hour that never saw me. They were reaching in the back to get something, and it was an SUV, and it piled in the back of the church van, and it pushed the back in enough to break the rims on the back tires and blew the glass out, which went forward, and then I hit the Lexus, and then I went backwards, but my head hit the window and made it, about this much of the window powder. Man, that kind of hurt. It got my attention. But we were fine. We all walked away. Nobody was badly hurt. Nobody even went to the hospital. But it ripped the bumper off the car ahead of me. So it was this big collision. And I go, man, I got like 30 minutes to Bible study. I called Joette. She happened to be close. We made it. We gave the Bible study. Nobody even really knew about it. I did. The next day, my neck was kind of stiff, and I had to get a little bit of the blood and glass out of my hair before Bible study. But, another challenge. This is another test. Are we going to quit? We can do this. We're okay. When you're going through hard things or tough things happen, you can do more good. People start listening. They go, hey, this person's not negative. They're not depressed. I need to be more like that. So you can do good, and remember that. When you're in the hospital, don't be one of those depressed, woe is me people. Be the happy person, the upbeat person, the one that's moving forward, that's trusting God, and you'll do a lot of good for people in life if you face life that way. When we look at faith, it's something you have to understand about faith, and I have to understand, faith has nothing to do with the five senses. And we're human, so it's, we can relate to human things we can smell, touch, feel, taste, like all the senses, we get that. And if we don't think right, we think too human, honestly. We don't trust in things we can't see if we're not careful. Here's a good example we can learn from Simon. Let's go to Luke 5. Luke 5, verse 1. I'm just going to read a short account because Simon, later named Peter, was a good example here for all of us. He gave us a good example to follow with regard to faith. And there's some lessons we can glean from this short story. In Luke 5, verse 1, it says here, "Now so it was, as the multitude pressed about him," around Christ, "to hear the word of God, that he stood by the lake of Gennesaret." And as you know, that lake has at least two other names. But anyway, verse 2, "And he saw two boats standing by the lake, but the fishermen had gone from them and were washing their nets. And he got into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put out a little from the land, and he sat down and taught the multitude from the boat." In different gospel accounts, Christ went into the boat for different reasons. Sometimes the crowds were like going to crush him. They're just pressing in, and he got in the boat, got out here in the water, and then he could teach. And water makes a really good sound board, so to speak. If you've ever camped on a lake and people can be all the way across the lake on an island, and you can hear them like they're right next to you because the water helps that sound travel. And so this was a good way to speak to people on the shore. Everybody could hear him. And he asked Simon to put out a little from the land, and he teaches from there. Verse 4, "Now when he had stopped speaking, he said to Simon, 'Launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch.'" Christ gives the order, right? Put your nets down in here. Simon, on the other hand, knew the facts, right? Physical facts. There were no fish to be caught at that time in that location. And the reason he knew it, because he and the other fishermen had just spent hours right there in that spot in a fruitless attempt to catch any fish. It was bad fishing right then and there. Verse 5, "But what did Simon do when Christ said this? Simon answered and said to him, 'Master, we've toiled all night and caught nothing. Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net. Because you told me to, I'm going to do it. I trust you, and I'll do what you say.' Simon stated the physical facts. He acknowledged them. But then he added, very importantly, 'Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net.'" It was the right reaction. That's how we have to think. That's what we have to do. It's the opposite, right, of how the Israelites and the spies who went into the promised land reacted, except for, Joshua and Caleb. What would your reaction have been if you were there and Christ told you, "Let the nets down"? Would you have argued? A lot of people may have. "I ain't doing that. I wasted time all night. I just got these nets up. I'm not going to put them down in there again. This is fruitless. It's pointless." Not what Peter did. Verse 6, "And when they had done this, they caught a great number of fish. So many, it says, their net was breaking. So he signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and they filled both the boats so full of fish they began to sink." That's some really good fishing. I took a few days off when I was up north to fish for walleye in Lake Erie with some friends. And it wasn't that good, but it was good. We got our limit every day. So we'll share some smoked walleye here once we smoke them with all of you. But you see, one of the biggest hindrances for all of us to faith is the fact that the world all around us is so physical. It's so real. We're made from the dust of the ground. We're naturally in tune with physical things. And God knew that. That's why he did things like Days of Unleavened Bread, put the physical leaven out of your house. You're a human. You can get that. Like, here's bread, and you're going to put the leaven out. And you can learn a spiritual principle, which is really important, by doing that. You go to the feast, get a temporary dwelling. It's called the Feast of Booths, right? Temporary dwellings. I tell you to do that, God says, because you're physical. And when you do that, you'll realize, look, life is temporary. This is all passing. We're pilgrims. We're strangers on the earth. And your mind will go, look, I got to seek first the kingdom. I want to be a part of God's family. And so that physical thing teaches us a very powerful spiritual lesson. God has a book of life. He doesn't need a book of life to remember, hey, did I put that guy in the book or not? He doesn't need a book. He knows the number of hairs on our head. But for us, a book of life, our name's in it, that I can relate to that. So God gives us a book of life. He talks about it. So as humans, yes, we're in tune with physical things that we can detect with our five senses. See, hear, taste, smell, feel, the physical things. And the knowledge that comes into our brains comes through these senses, these five physical senses. But there's another channel, and that's a spiritual channel, and it's through that channel that faith comes. And again, faith is a gift given by God through his Spirit. And with God's Spirit, we have to start to think differently. Look at 2 Corinthians 4:18. A couple more verses here in conclusion. 2 Corinthians 4:18. Says, while we do not look at the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen, for the things that are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. And the verse before that talks about our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. So again, we're trying to think differently. We're realizing this is temporary. These are physical things. They get old, they wear out. But there's a more important thing happening here. Our spiritual lives are far more important, and we have to focus on spiritual things and the plan of God and the very fact why were we born in the first place? Why were we made physical? We have to develop character, and God will develop character within us if we allow him, if we let his Spirit guide and direct us. If our minds are mostly on the world, if our minds are mainly on physical things, then exercising the spiritual element of faith is very difficult. We basically begin to sink in the waters of doubt. On the other hand, if we fill our minds with spiritual things, if we're studying God's Word, if we allow God's Spirit to work in us, if we're praying as we ought to pray, then faith is going to be available when we need it. Romans 8, a couple verses here in Romans 8, 5, and 6. And these are key verses of how our minds should work as converted people in God's church. And by the way, the Bible's clear here in Romans 8 as well, verse 9, that you're none of God's unless you have his Spirit. God's people have his Spirit. That's how he knows who his people are. We live at a time right now where many of God's people with God's Spirit are scattered. And, God loves unity. It's a shame we're scattered, but it's part of the fact. And we have to be careful to not judge others or elevate ourselves. God knows who his people are. They have his Spirit. And we see in the Old Testament, there were 7,000 had not bowed their knee to Baal. And so God knows who they are. We don't have to know. We just have to do the right thing ourselves and realize we need God's Spirit. But here in Romans 8, verses 5 and 6, it says, for those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. It will lead to eternal life. There's two paths, right? One leads to death, the second death in the lake of fire. The first path leads to life, eventually eternal life in the family of God. And we're on the path. We can turn back. We put our hand to the plow. If we look back, God said, you're not fit for the kingdom. You've got to keep going. Persevere. Get your minds off the physical, onto the spiritual. One of the greatest keys to receiving more faith is that very fact. And there are some people that I meet that all they can ever talk about is physical things. we should talk about the things of God, and that should be common. I'd say my best friends are people that I regularly talk to. Almost the majority of what we talk about is the things of God, the church, the feast, the holy days, one another, the things we're going through. Of course, we have to talk about physical things, build this, paint that, fix that. That's part of life. We're physical, nothing wrong with that. Balance. And by the way, we should be balanced Christians. All too often we have people in the church, they're unbalanced. They're in this ditch or that ditch. Christ was not a person who was unbalanced. He's balanced. That doesn't mean we compromise with sin. It just means we're balanced people. We're not extremists. Romans 10, just page over, 17. Romans 10, 17. Another key here says, so then faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So the accounts written in the Bible, in the word of God, should become real to us. And we should review them often. Get used to thinking as God thinks. Get used to thinking that God is the living God who acts on your behalf, on my behalf, on the behalf of his people. And he is absolutely faithful to what he has promised. In fact, the whole context of Hebrews 11 is about individuals who successfully kept their minds on spiritual things, the promises of God. They could not sense those things physically. They had their minds on the world to come. They were focused, looking ahead. We have to look ahead. We have to realize whatever I go through now, temporary. However painful, however difficult, this is temporary. So I have to pass those tests, every one of them as they come up, because I don't know when it's time for me to go to sleep. In the meantime, better pass as many of those test questions as I can, right? Do the best I can. Try to be a 100-fold person. Whatever you do it with your might. These guys in Hebrews 11, look at verse 10. Here's where their minds were. Hebrews 11, verse 10. I'll just look at one or two here. Hebrews 11:10, he says, for he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Verse 16, Hebrews 11. But now they desire a better, that is a heavenly country. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Where were their minds? Looking into the future. Thinking about a heavenly country. Thinking about the return of Christ, the establishment of his kingdom on the earth. The plan of God actually coming to fruition. We are at the door of the return of Christ. We are in the final stretch. And if we don't believe it, we better study our Bible and wake up, because we're there. What is happening? And I look at 2020, compared to 2000. What's happening is exponentially sped up. And of course, we had the warning, right, in 9/11. A shot across the bow. God got the attention of everybody in America. It was short-lived. 2008, we had a financial crash. We're going to have something far worse than that around the bend. God, it's not that God isn't warning. It's not that God's not trying to wake us up. We've had so many natural disasters and so much trouble. Wake up, God says, wake up. Everybody's asleep. We can't be asleep. These people believed in blessings that were yet to come, and they endured, it says in verse 27, as seeing him who is invisible. They believed in God. They believed and trusted that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him, and they were convinced and trusted what God said and lived their lives that way. They all said, in effect, I acknowledge the physical circumstances. I acknowledge the hardships. I acknowledge the trial, the pain, the danger. I get that. Nevertheless, these guys in Hebrews 11 and women said, I believe God and I believe in his promises. Can God say the same about each of us?
For more information, go to our website at cogassembly.org. Copyright 2021, Church of God Assembly. All rights reserved.